What you doing? I'm your Otakutainment, theacstories, really trying to hone in and control all my reviewer powers for this Otakutainment reviews. I'm talking about Sin's Legacy Volume 1 by Conner Wheatcroft Robinson with art by byallen. It was published back in November 2024 and it has a pretty good length of 336 pages, which I feel is a little more than you would typically see in original English light novels. Here is the more non-spoiler review. That way we can just get a more overview of how I feel about a lot of the big parts of this. Sin's Legacy primarily follows Gavigan, Timoko, and Jonah Recroning, intending Sin's Academy to get stronger, even more importantly, learn to control their powers. They meet in some capacity other students and teachers. As their school days go by, they all eventually have run-in with those who want misguided revenge for being experimented on. Now, I'll go ahead and say, there's a lot of names that are not typical. I actually love that. Makes it hard to pronounce, though. So that's the more vague premise of where this story is going. Firstly, though, before I get to the story critiquing, this is supposed to be Volume 1. It really seems like it should be Volume 2. There is a prequel that makes it work, but there are a lot of references to the prequel that they're not hard to grasp, but they're referred to enough where, of course, like, you want to read the prequel now. Yeah. And you can't ignore them, but then it's kind of makes you feel like you might be missing out on something. It's really the layout of the book that indicates this should be Volume 2 the most. The book picks up with Chapter 21. There's a list of agency classes and the characters, energy practices, which are the powers, and there's a previously, all of which you don't normally see in a Volume 1. This is more for sequel books. And there's a big enough shift with the story setting and characters that if these points were fixed or removed, or maybe just even moved to the back, I don't know, it will feel a lot more like a Volume 1. Also, the prequel came out first. Typically, Volume 1 comes out first, and then weirdly the prequel comes out second, acting like it's sequel. I don't know, you usually read the prequel after Volume 1 anyways, so I don't know, I feel like this should be Volume 2 if anything. Just call the prequel Volume 1. It works, it's fine. I don't know what the decision of all this was, because it still follows pretty much the same main character. Now, the writing of the world and the characters makes this book feel like it should be a lot longer. I know it's already 300 pages. I already said it's longer than typical original English light novels. It should be more of a full-length fantasy novel. I feel like there's enough material there. I feel like we're only getting a taste of all these characters in this world. It's a typical thing for me. I say I'm a greedy reader. I'm always wanting more anyway, so that doesn't help. Now, the settings we see, we get enough detail. Actually, more than it's typical. But that's a gripe for a different thing. But both the scenes where the characters are and the ones passing by don't feel fully lived in. We at least know what they look like. We don't really know how the people are actually living in them. This ends up making them seem more like a backdrop, just a nice little pretty view, but that's about it. So much so that they go to academy. It's a school. I felt like it was supposed to be school, but it really seems like it's just a training facility, or it was said a training facility. We're told they train there. We hardly see them train there. So we just don't really get them much of the school. And maybe I'm just confused. Maybe it's not actually a school. We really don't see any other kind of school aspects. So maybe it is just a training place. Now, as for the characters, we get a change of perspective. Still like third person perspective though. In every short chapter. And I want to make that clear, because the short chapter is what's kind of bites us in the butt, because I like having a bunch of different characters' perspectives. I like being able to see how all the characters end up becoming connected, getting to know them. And I like exploring all this, but the chapters are so short that we don't really get enough time with them. And then all the personalities seem to blend together. It doesn't really seem like they're different characters. There's only really a couple at the beginning that seem any different at all. And I'll get to that when I actually review some of the main points in the book later. But it just also makes it feel choppy. You don't really get to know. And it's an interesting thing. And how it's done. I like how it's written. I just want more of it. Because it's, like I said, it's still third person. But you definitely get a feeling that it's coming from the person. The other problem I have, though, is because it's from this character's perspective. We don't get to actually know what the characters look like. We get plenty of description of backgrounds, unless you look at the pictures, and you don't really get to see them that much anyways. You kind of don't know what the characters look like. Maybe another character will see, and then you get that from a different, but, and I get it. Realistically, this all makes sense. Now it's more of a looking into how writing works, and you're like, oh, this is why we do these weird kind of intros for characters that realistically wouldn't make sense, because if you don't know what the characters are kind of like. Now, aside from the short kind of choppy chapters, changing perspective literally almost every chapter, I actually do like the writing style. It's somewhat denser, more longer winded than is typical for original English light novels, and I really prefer it. And there's a lot of comparing my preferred writing style to this, and I feel like there's so much similarities. It feels like, honestly, a great exercise for me to be like, oh, this is what I like, but I also see how it can be tweaked to be better. So I feel like it might end up making me a better writer. That's not, I'm talking about this. So it just feels like things are being intentionally held back for word count, for link's sake. Maybe it felt like it was going too long. I feel like there's a lot more content to this that ended up getting cut, maybe? I don't know, I'm just speculating, but I just feel like there's supposed to be more. Now, the art is another interesting part. And here, I'll mean this truly as a compliment, but I don't know, I feel like just the way I say things sometimes seems weird. My first impression of the cover art and some of the other coloring pages in this was, what if medieval art actually looked good and you could tell what it looked like? Because if you see a lot of like that medieval art, especially stuff that would be put in books and stuff, it looks weird. This kind of has the same kind of, I don't know, artistic touch to it, but it looks good. And does that make any sense? And it makes it unique. It makes it pop out more, and it's a lot different than what I'm used to seeing, especially for light novel, original English light novels. They all try to have that kind of same anime look, and they all kind of start looking the same. So I like that this is at least unique. And then when I look a little closer, I think it's more how it's colored. The coloring is just the most unique part, because when you look at the black and white art on the character page at the very beginning, it's more in line with the light novel character art you would see. Then the other issue I kind of have is with the placement of the art. I don't think it made sense where the pieces are placed. Some of the art, I'm like, did this actually happen in the story? I don't remember this scene being described. There's one, if I remember correctly, of all the students just walking a hall or looking like they're, chatting, having a good time together. I don't remember that all happening like that. And where it's placed is not even near it. There's another picture of the villains that's kind of, I think, closer, but also it could have been placed better. Now, overall, I'm nitpicking. There's really nothing bad about it. It's my typical thing. I wanted more. I can see there could be more. There's obviously plenty I like, but in the end, I couldn't fully get into it, and it was weird because I enjoyed what I read while I was reading it. Like I already said, I really liked the writing style. I think it was so choppy, and the structure with it changing back and forth, but then not giving me enough of it. It's like I would read a chapter, maybe 2 chapters, and then be like, eh. And literally, I'm trying to think of how long the pages were. I feel like most chapters weren't even 10 pages long, maybe something around that. So I'll read a little bit, and then there's like that cutoff, and it's like, okay, well, stuff was happening, and now you're cutting me off, and then it's like, well, I'm going to do something else for now. I'll come back to this later. So it actually took me a while. I guess on the good note, it felt like it was even longer than I thought it would be, but yeah, like, I enjoy what I read until, like, it stops me, and then I'm like, okay, there's nothing that was always pushing me to keep reading more. There was nothing driving me. It was just like, next thing. It's like, okay. And that's also kind of deals with the structure of this story. It was kind of really rinse and repeat. Looking through it, it was really like, okay, the beginning, best part of the book. You're meeting the characters. There's a lot of personality with that. You're getting some of the backstory on what's happening and what this world is. But then it's like they train. We see the villains. They train. There's a conflict. They train. There's another conflict. They're kind of recovering / wanting to train. There's a conflict. The end. So there's not really much beyond that. We don't get to see the characters really build up any kind of relationship. It's hardly justified how they get close at all anyways. So I don't know. I just felt like there were more. Overall, there should have been more. I'm going to go over just, I think, more of the interesting or important parts of the story. I'm not going to go super detailed in everything because I think you should read it. If you haven't read it already, then you kind of probably already know what I'm talking about. Each chapter, like I said, different character perspective, but also so short that it's literally like, this one thing happens. Okay, next chapter, different character. This one thing happens. Okay, next chapter, different character. It's that. There are actually some chapters where I'm like, this should have been like combined together. There's actually a couple chapters where I'm like, well, why didn't you split this up? That's a little inconsistent. So let's just start at the beginning. That introduces us to this whole world and all these characters. First, before I even do that, I forgot to say, this is supposed to be fantasy. I get a lot of sci-fi vibes from it. It feels like almost, I don't know, Star Trek-y, without the like spaceships and stuff. Like, I don't know. I couldn't really tell. Maybe it's a combination of sci-fi fantasy. I don't know. But it makes sense when I talk about the group we first encounter. It follows, at least in the first 2 chapters, Yin Malik and Harvey Greaves, also known as Pinball, 2 of the characters with the most personality, especially Yin. They're visiting a castle of the Konungri, also called the Simians, on Skyland. All this is like, okay, Konungri, Simians sounds kind of sci-fi, maybe fantasy. Skyland, okay, it's a mix. I don't know if it's supposed to feel sci-fi. Maybe it's just me and my history with sci-fi. But so Yin is there to diagnose a Konungri child, as well as to try to get Simian secrets, build up an alliance. And the child's name is Jonah Rentcrony, one of the main characters, who has absent energy that is causing this weaker natural energy to retaliate. There's just pretty much an internal power conflict inside Jonah, who I might keep saying Jonah. It referred to a lot as Joan, just like Gavigan is referred to as Gavi, so I'll probably use those names more often. So Yin's plan is to take Jonah to the Groundlands to help, and it's also a way to just study simians in order to also help build this alliance. Nothing seems malicious at all this. It is weird that I'm going to take your child, kind of have a different reason for doing this, and actually never comes back yet for this. So all of this is going well. It's all is for nice, peaceful intent, just helping a kid. So Drone is taken to the Groundlands called Faltochi, and seems to have a little butting heads with Yin a little bit. Jonah comes from a royal family, and it's also kind of Yin's personality. The fact that Yin has an actual strong, distinct personality. Jonah kind of has it also, like, off-putting, like, I'm royalty, kind of superior, which fades more. But then, and Gavi also is the only one with real personality. All the other students kind of blend together after this point. So once Joan arrives at Yin's estate, meets Frisia Chesney, one of Yin's partners, and then Gavigan Timoko also introduced as Yin's partner. This is all the stuff that the prequel would help with, and get to understand who these are, the relationships, because we don't get any more than that. And then there's a weird part that was always I felt like it would have been insulting to me, because we get to see them on the cover, so we know what they look like. But Gabby keeps calling Joan BW for a black and white. I feel like that would be so insulting. I don't know why Joan lets that happen. It just seems rude and making fun of Joan's condition. But there's not really any pushback on it. Now, in chapter 25, we finally get Gabby's perspective, you know, the main character. And it's just them chatting and getting to know each other more. Really the only character relationship we get. I keep saying this. The characters do talk a bit. What I'm saying is more to the degree is not enough. And it feels like there's a lot of time, because it does skip through time a bit. all in the same school year, I assume. But there's just not enough of it to justify how the characters build any kind of bond. But yeah, they do get to know each other a bit. There's a lot of Gavi, remember a character named Ken, also a prequel thing. Actually, something we get like 2 chapters at the end, like extra prequel chapters about Ken. But you gotta wait till the end for that. But Gavi's trying to take on this like reverse mentor role. Ken was Gavi's mentor, kind of. Gavi's now going kind of be John's mentor, something like that. Friends mentor, more like friendly rivals, if anything. Week later, it's finally time for Gavi and John to go to the academy, run late, of course, because they take a small little tour, memory lane, more prequel stuff. This should have been volume 2. And then meet a tutor named Andrea Egan. Then continue on, another chapter, another character we meet, kind of see the view of Eri Minthra. I put in my note, not really a needed chapter. I don't get what it was going for. Eri is the daughter of Arsenio Skyler. Names, I love them, but hard to say. And works a lot with mind manipulations. This is when we kind of start seeing powers explained, and I actually would have preferred this kind of like power slowly get introduced instead of like that page is just like, here's what the powers are, and it's like, I'm not gonna remember that, because guess what, I can't even tell you what the powers are right now. But it's a welcoming speech, and we just see the perspective of Araminta like having bear all this distracting mental noise. I think this is supposed to set up Eri for like the heroine type of the story. And yeah, it kind of works. We just, like I said, not enough yet to justify it. Even with these different perspectives. Now, Gavi and Joan are meeting as all the non-combat students leave. So yeah, there it is. I completely forgot. There are non-combat students. This is a school. It just focuses on the combat students. Maybe that's the only reason this group of students is here, is to fight. And that's it. Maybe they learn nothing else. Okay. So they meet just a bunch of people. Mainly at first they meet Baxter Siathagara, who's more friendly, overconfident, or is said to be more friendly and overconfident. Rinru Asara, the more standoffish ones. Then there is Siler Ponza, who is unignited, which I guess something I haven't said before. They're the people with the powers, pretty much, and pretty much like nerdy type character. And this, like I just told you, this is who they are supposed to be. So the idea was obviously planted for all these students to have these kind of more typical character tropes. They're just not elaborated on enough. More I talk about, I'm like, I'm really feeling like I'm missing out. I feel like I'm now accidentally talking chapter by chapter, because trying to talk about what happens is from a different character perspective, and each character perspective changes each chapter. So I don't know, bear with me on that, I guess. I want to talk about these points because they're kind of important. There are the more interesting parts to me. Anyways, back to Arsenio. Goes over all the students' background mentally, so we get to see more on who all these students are, which also kind of makes the character page pointless at the beginning. Like I said, maybe something at the end, just as a reminder. So, here's all the characters you met. Here's more about them, kind of, if you want to know. And then all the pairings are announced. Of course, Gavi and John are together. Arsenio is the tutor for them. And then we see Arsenio want to prove worth as a tutor with a fight, and then easily beat Gavi and John. I think I said at the very beginning, and it's a big point throughout all this, is Gavi is so afraid of being too strong, and it seems like should be. Really, in a lot of the fighting, there's nothing that special. Maybe it's because Gavi is holding back so much that it makes not seem as good at fighting. And Joan, we don't really... There's been some training. A lot of Joan seems to be just teleporting more than anything. But if you can call it teleporting. So, the fighting isn't as spectacular at first for Gavi, even though it was built up being like, so afraid of the power, and that is a point through it, but it's like, okay. Now we actually switch to antagonist perspective. Someone named Gun, who, at least in this point in the book, it all comes out more later and he's explained, but at least when I was reading this, you get this one short chapter of here's Gun, here's this group. We get some details, but it's kind of vague. Maybe it's too feel mysterious at this point, and rightfully so, that makes sense. But from what I could get at this point, the group are people, beings that were experimented on by Maxim Bio, another group affiliated with, I don't know, Sins. I feel like even that could have been explained more, unless, that's more for future development. And that's something I have to keep, is like, maybe we're not getting stuff because it's for the future. But this is also where we get a random photo of the Academy class walking through the hall, like I mentioned earlier. I don't know why. Where is this group looking at it? Where was this photo taken? If that's the case, it's a random spot. Now, what I said so far is pretty much the opening. We met the characters, we kind of got the setting for how it's going to go, and that's pretty much how this is going to flow. It'll be a little academy training, like I said, then there's going to be a conflict, there's going to be a perspective of the antagonist group. Now, the first main conflict of this story is they're getting sent on a hunt for some kind of beast. And another weird part, if I'm remembering correctly, and I took notes, so I'm hoping, is this is a beast they've captured before, but it seems a lot like they have no idea about it. We do eventually get the name of the beast, named Born Demore, but so some of them are fighting that, but then there's another, who I kept referring to as reptilian foe, that pops up, and they have to start fighting that person too. And overall they win, but this is when we finally get to see Gavi start to lose control and scaring others. That was mentioned and hinted at a lot before. Now we finally get to see it, and we also finally get introduction to this reptilian species of people that is getting experimented on. And then it cuts, like I said, back to the antagonist perspective. This time someone named Casino. They're the group that arranged this attack. We're looking for and found Dr. Claude Phoebe, who was the one that experimented on them, even though try to claim ignorance. So we have one captured, named Boyd. We get Eerie kind of interrogating. We also get like a yin perspective at this point that was really not needed. It was pretty much just a recap of what happened. Now, it's from this point that stuff actually starts picking up, a lot more switching back between protagonist and antagonist perspectives. We see Casino, Lappy, and Nelly, Elepide, with Gun after Boyd and the other one, Ura, were captured. And they make plans to invade what's called the Womb. So some will go to Sen's Academy to save those two. And then we get that other pick of all of them together. But now they're separate. It should have been earlier. Maybe back when the class was walking picture, it should have been replaced by this one. So this is when the next conflict starts taking place. It's a rescue mission from the antagonist. And there's a lot of fighting, but overall, their plan fails pretty badly. Gavi and Joan end up seeing Gun, but then Gun just beats up on Gavi and Joan. So everything else was going fine for protagonist side. Antagonist side doing bad, but then, again, we see Gavi being worried about being too strong in this stuff, and then Gun pops up and is like, nah, and just, deals with him easily. So that conflict is over. John and Gavi pretty beat up. Now it's time for bed rest for them. Switching back, antagonists. Gun and Casino are the only ones pretty much left now. It seems this whole time Gun has pretty much just been manipulating Casino, and for some reason, this is something I never understood, convinces Casino to want revenge against Joner and Gavi. I never understood why exactly those two. Especially since Gun could have done it itself. I think it's mainly to mess with Yin, if I'm just making assumptions right, because obviously Gavi is close, and I think Joner just more by proxy. But yeah, so enter the next conflict, even though it's supposed to be recovering. Going into this last conflict, it's Baxter reroom with Gavi and Joner, going to another village just to do some shopping. It honestly just kind of feels random. A random way to enter the biggest and most important conflict of the story and last one. But yeah, Cassino is in a village, just waiting, terrorizing, I guess. And then we also learn Gun has a client that wants Gavi. I don't know if that was ever mentioned before at the nearly end of the book. But it's also like, why didn't Gun just take Gavi last time if that's the point? There's a little bit of confusion on all this stuff. But for the most part, it's just fighting. So the group is kind of split. Some fighting Guns, some fighting Cassino. Eventually, though, Cassino figures out Gun was lying. But for some reason, it's still fighting just because Gun is too strong. So just go and keep being wrong just because, you know, being afraid of the other person. And after beating Cassino, it's like, okay, the focus is going to be on Gun. Gun's supposed to be really strong. They do something. Large blast ends the conflict. It's just like, okay, kind of anticlimactic. I thought the fight was just getting really interesting, and then it stops. And like I keep saying, oh yeah, and they fight. The fights are done well. I'm not a huge action person. I really like it when it's done well, and the action scenes they work. But then you get to this point, it's like, oh, it's over. Okay. And then we get to the last chapter. Like I said, the fight just was over. Gun actually disappears. We get Yin's perspective again, just thinking over everything and the fight and the students' progress, all that. But then we see, and I guess this is a continuation for the series going in the future, having someone named Atiana investigate Maxim biology. So yeah, we get to see, or at least you can hope that the main characters didn't know what was going on with all the experimenting. Gavi, of course, knows. I guess Yin is now suspicious, or there's something else going on. I want Yin to be a good person, because, like I said, probably my favorite character. Even though not in it that much, but just the beginning was enough. But that's it for the main story of this book. Now, like I said, there was a character that Gavi kept thinking of a lot throughout, named Ken. We get 2 little extra bonus chapters. Really, it's chapter 28 and 20B. I don't know why it was 2 separate chapters. Unless, and this is what I said, is one should have been chapter 1A. It was Ken coming from a family of flame users and just family drama and jealousy and that, and then eventually meeting Yin, just embarrassing some of the family, and then Ken going with Yin. That's it. So it's prequel to the prequel, if anything. And I don't know where the best spot to put that would be. I guess it works if Ken is coming back in the next volume to leave this at the end. Just don't call it 28. I don't know. It's not a 28 thing. It's a 1A thing or a 0.5 thing chapter. And then the next one still is Ken's perspective is Ken leaving Yin sometime after the first or the prequel, and then wanting to go learn more from someone named Sel Toso. That one makes more sense to be a 20A since it's actually in between, but yeah, so it's more just hinting at, hoping at least, Ken's going to play a bigger part in the next book. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about Sin's Legacy. I know maybe I didn't need to go through all those points. I kind of want to go through them just for myself because it is me kind of reviewing, more discussing my thoughts in a little bit more detail. There's a lot to this. I was kind of picking out the parts that I wanted done more of or done better, more elaborated on. But hopefully you watched this and stopped before I started spoiling if you haven't read the book yet, because I would still recommend go read this. Read the prequel in that order. Go read the first volume, which is the prequel, and then read the second volume, which is said to be volume 1. I'm going to stick to that. The structure, if anything, is the weird part. I like it. Maybe it just needs to be tweaked more to be better because it's not working completely, for me at least. I think that might just be how I am. I don't know. I don't want to sound too negative because I liked what I read. I just didn't like how I read it, if that makes any sense. I thought I like the writing style. And another little, I don't know, you can say fun note. It's more of a UK writing thing. I kept noticing a lot of points because I was reading this so closely. It's just a lot of comparison things. I don't know if it's worth mentioning. I'm going to anyways. There's not like the little periods with the misses and not a second period and initials. The spelling, a lot of S's instead of Z's, stuff like that. So that was a more interesting note for me to be like, oh, of course that makes sense. There's a difference in writing style slightly in a whole nother country. And that's a random thing I wanted to point out because I kept noticing. I was like, oh, that's interesting too. But if you haven't read Sin's Legacy yet, I'll leave links to find it and hopefully you'll read it. Hopefully you haven't listened to all this now that I'm thinking about it. I'll put this at the end, so maybe you will saw the links somewhere. Anyways, I have hope for the next volume and seeing where the characters grow, hopefully having a more natural bond building time, hopefully seeing more of the school, seeing more of the world, meeting more characters, seeing who's going to be the next, antagonist. Gun's still around doing something. Where's this going? What's up with, the Maxim biological? So there's still a lot of, mystery and things we can see in this world, and I'm interested to see where it goes. But if you have already interested in reading or just want to say something, go ahead, leave comments, find me on social media, The AC Stories. Email me, theacstories@gmail.com, or join my Discord and we can talk about whatever there. Links will also be in the description for those. But that's it for this review of Sin's Legacy Volume 1 by Conner Wheatcroft Robinson. Like I said, I like it. I hope you like it too. Before I go, I want to thank my Ko-fi and Patreon supporters, Vix Lab and Julio Vasquez. If you also want to help support me, you don't have to. I appreciate it either way. You get these shoutouts, you get notes, you get my own writing, and all of that kind of stuff. But that is it for this Otakutainment Reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I've been your Otakutainer, The AC Stories. Until next time, bye.